This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I'm backing up to last week a little bit on the cipher solves from Harriet Suchet. Of course, I got one blowback on YouTube, which was interesting. I know that people listen to some of the things that she has to say. They don't really quite grasp or understand where she's coming from with it. I just want to remind everybody that that's her solve. It's something she believes that she has uncovered. It makes for an interesting story, and it does kind of follow along with some of the things that we think are going on with the Zodiac himself. I don't necessarily negate the evidence that she's putting forth. I do entertain it because, again, I'm just trying to put some levity or maybe some type of information in between these crimes and the murders and all of this chaos. So something fun to look at a minimum. I know that Jack is a match to the handwriting. That's what I'm here for. I'm walking through his evidence along with the Zodiac case, making those connections between who he was, what he did, what he was capable of doing. And the handwriting really is the only compelling reason why we should be looking at Jack. All the rest of it is very circumstantial evidence at this point, and all other suspects have no match to it. The purported solves that name Jack are just that, purported solves. It does help to bolster my contentions, which is why I put them on here, but that's just fortuitous. It's not something that makes or breaks the handwriting examination and the evidence that Jack is the best fit for the Zodiac Killer. I want to welcome Nolan Del Campo to the show this morning.
Good morning, everybody.
How'd your week go?
It went really well. I took my mom down to Bakersfield to visit her sister, and we got to see several aunts and uncles and cousins and everything. It was great. Family
time. We love that. I've been working on chaotic cases, family law, cheating spouses. Some of the most craziest stuff this last week has occurred. People are at the height of their forging and their dirty deeds. So I seem to be extremely busy just trying to make sure I fit everything in. I want to go ahead and put up the PowerPoint presentation at this point. Let's make sure I'm over here on it. Go back. There we go. I actually had somebody contact me on my LinkedIn account, and they wrote, "The so-called ciphers are all branches of Arabic, a form not seen often. The Belli tapes, he is using real voice in two places. The languages used were not ciphers at all. They are language translations. Z340 equals Tamil, 7408 is Africans, 718 is Africans, Z13 is Hindi, Z32 is Telugu. Noticed daughter born in Middle East, that's how I knew. And DNA match in another state he killed in. There is a ton of more clues, most in the Z340 lines 5 through 20, which has never been seen by the public." So I'm so confused over this message. I did talk to Harriet, and she said some of the symbols do have some tiebacks to Arabic connections, but literally everything has a tieback to either a Latin origin or an English origin or an Arabic origin. But I haven't really seen any symbols that I identify as being Arabic. Have you? Are you there with me, Nolan?
No, but I'm not that familiar.
Well, when you think of Arabic, you think of like the Quran, you think of the East Indian writings, you think of those types of symbols and things. I have not seen any of the codes that incorporated those type of symbols and their alphabet, should I say. I'm not sure that the English letters are are ever posed by the Arabic alphabet. I mean,
we use, as a society, we use Arabic numerals, but not the alphabet.
right, but we're not even seeing those in these particular solves. So I got a little confused, and I did talk to Harriet a little bit about it, and she says yes, some does have Arabic origin, okay, but not that they're specifically Arabic symbols that are being used in these. And then she says that the Belli tapes, he is using his real voice in 2 places. I wasn't aware there were Belli tapes.
I think in the movie, I don't know if they recorded it, but they show him, or there's a audio of someone calling Belli and purporting to be the Zodiac.
And that wasn't the one that was on the radio station, so that was separate and outside of?
I think you got to call it home. But also, yeah, the radio call in is, maybe that was the recording she's referring to. I don't know.
I have no idea, because they ruled that individual out as being somebody who was in the Napa State Hospital that was just poking around. And the more I read about it, it appears he didn't call the show and ask for Belli and Bailey. He had actually called, I believe, the police department and said that he wanted to speak to them on that particular show, which begs the reason why that particular show, what was the purpose of that one. And then, of course, I saw the daughter born in Middle East. That definitely would rule Jack out if this guy was definitely the Zodiac killer. But she really kind of leaves things open where you can't ask questions. There's a ton of more clues, she says, in the Z340 lines 5 through 20, which was never seen by the public. What does she mean the lines 5 through 20 were never seen by the public? Again, that's almost as if to say we've been given some other image other than what the Zodiac wrote for her to have lines 5 through 20, which the public has never seen. Yeah, I get extremely confused. Yeah. And that's really kind of the thing that boggles me about it is, where are these Belli tapes that she's talking about? Who is this individual? This individual purportedly has a tie-in to a murder in Florida, which they've been connected to by DNA. So I would think if they have a good DNA profile on this person, and then they have him connected to at least one murder, how does that play into where the Zodiac was and what he was doing? She also mentioned before he had left, I think it's the next comment, because I did ask a couple of questions. Ooh, I'm missing all right, let's go there. So she says in a follow-up, because I asked her some questions, she said it was found in Florida. He killed there too. I worked on the cold case. I don't know which code. She must be talking about the Florida cold case. I'm not sure how she possibly worked there. Her name is Sharon Lindamore, and she shows that she's a system analyst at Great Western Petroleum. Well, there's an oil connection if we ever had one. But found in Florida, he killed there too. I worked on the cold case. No, I'm not saying Zodiac is Middle Eastern. I asked that question. I feel he was practicing the language before he left in 75. Again, unanswered question. Left where in 75? Left America, left East India? Like what is this statement of left in 75? Because if he left America in 75, and went to Saudi Arabia or East India of some sort, then we have a slew of messages and letters that are coming through that are definitely written by the Zodiac. So if he's there, how is he here perpetrating these letters and crimes? He says, you don't believe me. You don't believe he had a daughter in the Middle East? He did. She was born there. I'm unable to tell name because I would have to give you his last name. I believe he worked on a solar farm in his occupation. And this is the truth. You have been lied to. Even Z lied to you. Huh. I am not sure where to go with all of those statements. I do believe that Z lied, but I think in areas that were more like word games versus lies. So he'd tell you something and you'd have to figure out what that meant. So the straightforward message would obviously not lead you to the end result. I know we've been lied to by the media. We've been lied to by Voight. We've been lied to by all kinds of people that are involved with this particular case. So I don't discount that by any means. I also noticed that when I was reading these messages and responding with her, she had literally hit up every single person's Zodiac post on YouTube as far as I could scroll. She literally just copy and pasted the same message over and over again, all the way down the realm. I eventually just had to give up. And I did see some interesting stuff as I was going through it, though. It seems to me to be some type of propaganda. These type of people will come out and say that there's proof, and then they're gone in a year or so. Like you never hear from them again. Kind of like the Deborah Perez thing, or the Earl Van Best, or Dorr, or, you know, all of these people that have been ruled out as fake suspects, or at least the media has propagated that information without fact checking to make sure that the person they're allowing to accuse of the suspect is really even telling the truth. There's no basis for it. The media just runs with it, and it seems to always be something that helps to at least disinform at a minimum. I get constant phone calls or text messages when these new stories come out, people letting me know what's come up so that I can quickly go in, do some research, and usually it's fairly easy to kind of rule them out. But
yeah. It seems to be that she's saying that she knows who the Zodiac is. I'm unable to tell name because I would have to give you his last name. So if she knows who he is, why doesn't she go public with it and case is solved?
That's my point. Everybody who tells me they can't, I get one of two statements. I can't tell you because he's being looked at, or I can't tell you because I would die.
Then I would have to kill you. Yeah.
Yeah, then I'd have to kill you. So I'm not really quite sure where I'm supposed to go with that. But I've never found anyone who puts on this type of a campaign to be telling the truth, simply because normal people do not have the time to do what she is doing by posting on every single person's Zodiac post, let alone making claims they can neither confirm nor back up because they can't tell you. I've heard this 100 times or more probably in the 15 years. I can't tell you how I know. I can't tell you what their name is. They can't answer any evidence. Give me some evidence. What do they look like? Where were they during particular years we know that are absolutely attributed to the Zodiac? Give us something. So I did look up Western Petroleum just to kind of get an idea. Says Great Western Petroleum was founded in 1958 by Frank and George Tabish. They started their business with a small service station in Missoula, Montana. By 1966, they purchased their supplier and became a wholesale gas, fuel, and distributor. The main focus of the business was to supply full-service gas stations, mines, paper mills, and logging operations. I think we just kind of wrapped up everything from newspapers, big business like gas and mines and logging operations, which really kind of scream Hearst to me. But it says by the 1980s, industry and demand had changed. Convenience stores became a major source of growth. Today, Great Western Petroleum's focus is to be a supplier of branded and unbranded fuels and lubricants to retail and wholesale businesses, agricultural, aviation, small business, commercial, and government consumers. So then, yes, all neatly wrapped up.
Yeah, I wonder if her superiors at Great Western know she's doing these posts.
Right? And what did she do previous to this that allowed her to work on the cold case? Or does she state, I worked on the cold case as I would state I'm working on the cold case, but I'm not really working, I'm not legitimately licensed, employed by an agency, or working, hand in hand with investigators. I mean, at one time, yes, I was working with the FBI, but not nearly as much help have I been to any of the other local agencies like Napa. They didn't want to go through it with me. LA decided they did not want to climb back into it. So while I, have presented evidence to them, wanted to be able to share what I had about Jack, none of them were interested in even taking a look at it. So for their statements that it's an open investigation and we can't talk about it, that is absolute crap, because if they would then sit down, take that information, on an intake, just like they would any other lead, and then at least work some aspect of it to assist in either excluding or identifying this individual as the Zodiac Killer. So summary of the Zodiac Killer. I have gone through this once before, but I thought it was interesting at the end of what we know so far. All 187s committed on weekends. All messages sent from SF except one from Pleasanton. Now, Pleasanton is one of those places on the murder map that does not list any victims, but we do have a letter coming out of there. So the Pleasanton letter to the LA Times, I believe they might be referring to him taking his credit for the Riverside activity. The envelopes are always over-posted. Sometimes they're not posted at all, but over-posted. Stamps are sideways or inverted. Misspelled short, simple words, apparently on purpose. That's a contention I made and had came forth in a linguistics exam for the FBI. May have knowledge of the following: cryptography, meteorology, explosive devices, charts and terminology of compass, latent fingerprint identification methods. They wrote in here, said concealed fingertips with fingernail polish, but I'm pretty sure what he said was airplane cement, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So even some of these things that are being typed up aren't even really telling us all the truth. He's familiar with typewriter and identification methods, light opera. He likes the publicity. He enjoys ridiculing the police, claims to be crack proof. He's an egotist. They say cultist, slaves for the afterlife. I think that's just a ploy to keep you guys running in a different direction. And he does not panic in a stressful situation. So as I compared that, or cross-compared that, should I say, that these murders happening only on weekends, Jack being punished and beaten by his father on weekends was one of the triggers Dennis claimed for his killing on the weekends. Jack does spell words incorrectly on, he does spell words incorrectly. I'm not going to say on purpose, but he spells them incorrectly, and then followed on a next line, he spells them correctly, and this happens in his own natural writing. He has knowledge of cryptography, meteorology, explosive devices we'll be talking about in 1976, charts and terminology of compass. We've already discussed about his camping, his knowledge of the ranger stations and different types of campgrounds or national forests. The charts and terminology of compass, we've seen that in Jack's own hand. We've seen latent fingerprint methods. Nail polish, I question, like I said. Airplane cement is what the Zodiac said. Jack is efficient with typewriter identification methods and light opera, likely because he also did the teletype machine, which we showed he had in 1962. He was repairing in a picture that Dennis had. He likes publicity and enjoys ridiculing the police, claims to be crack proof, the cultist, and does not panic in stressful situations. These all kind of wrap up the persona of Jack Terrence. So at some point during the early or late 60s, early 70s, Jack is separated from Nora, but he is still hanging out with Danny, her son. And Jack and Danny would leave to Tahoe, claiming to have been gold panning in the desert down south. And they were selling that gold in Nevada. So they would leave, I guess, down south, do what they called was gold panning, and then come back to the Nevada area and sell that gold. This could also be some of the jewelry or the, missing items from victims that they simply had melted down and turned over or sold as gold. I found it interesting because we're going to come up here in April of 1970 and we're going to see what's called, I call it the dragon card. Many might call it something else, but it is a gold mining person on the back of a dragon saying my ass is dragon. And he's really just poking fun again at the cops. So the gold panning greeting card kind of fits in with the fact that that's exactly what we see Jack is doing at this particular time in his life. Now, I did take a look at one of the first murders back after he had written the Fairfield letters to see if there were consistencies with the areas he stated he would kill in. One of the first ones I'd come across, which I believe has been solved, but it was another taxi cab driver in San Francisco. Robert Brommel actually admitted to this crime. Oakland Tribune ran a story on it saying Monday, January 26, 1970, SF cabbie shot in Zodiac style. Now, Brommel states that he was wrestling with this particular taxi cab driver because he wanted to rob him. And in that wrestling match, he somehow was capable of shooting Charles Jarman behind the right ear. So I'm trying to imagine how that could go down, that you would be wrestling with someone from a backseat. I mean, it does set you up for shooting somebody in the back of the head by accident, but how could that wrestling match go down if the driver's back to you? If the driver actually flips around in the seat and is facing you, then you could wrestle with him, right? I mean, how else could you wrestle with him if his back's turned to you and you're in the back seat?
That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. But it was very interesting that it was listed as one of the places he was going to kill in the Fairfield letter was, I think, 3 times in San Francisco. So I had at first thought this was one, but then I had later found this article that says man admits to killing, claims it was an accident. At this point in time, Yellow Cab is setting a reward for Zodiac, also for the murder of this particular homicide. It says, after the murder of Stein, Zodiac sent a macabre letter to the Chronicle claiming credit for the slaying. For proof, he enclosed a bloodstained piece of shirt he had torn from Stein's body. Since Jarman's death, however, Zodiac has not been heard from. So that's one of the reasons that they indicated they didn't believe it was connected, because he didn't brag about it. But we've already seen that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Zodiac claimed to have killed 3 people in San Francisco, because around that time there was a police officer killed, and then there was someone killed by a little bomb, a handmade bomb that was sent to a business not far from the Chronicle. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not familiar with that one. I do know of the one that you were just talking about before that, I believe, which you said was the police officer. We are going to be coming up on the annihilating letter where he states that he shot a man in a parked car with a .38. I just haven't been able to tie together the bullet or the caliber of the gun that police officer was shot with, but that kind of runs in tandem. But I also want to remind everybody, if he said, I'm not going to tell you about who I killed anymore, then he wouldn't have admitted to something like this. So even if we had somebody come forward who did commit the crime, they took credit for it, they were convicted, and they are doing their time for this particular crime, I would have to say that this one was likely ruled out just based on the fact that we had somebody who admitted to it. Why would you come forward and admit to it? He evidently was a busboy. He had some type of criminal background. He had dumped his wife and young 6-month-old, I think, daughter to come to California and couldn't really find a job. So he ended up being a busboy. He needed more money. And of course, that's why he literally robbed. So he did actually take $27, it says, from this particular cab driver. So I tend to believe that I could probably rule this one out. But I put this in this presentation way back in 2009. So now I'm just now doing the research to see whether or not it's even something that was capable, and finding these type of articles help to rule this kind of stuff out.
It doesn't sound like Zodiac to me.
No. They did initially, I think, when they were talking about the similarities between it and the Stein, they were still stating that Stein was a robbery, which I think in the end they finally came to the determination that it wasn't, and that's pretty much what set those two apart. And most of these crimes, watches were left, wallets were left, rings were left. We're going to talk about one here in a few minutes where a ring was left. And at the time, back in the 70s, it was worth $50. Today, that's a few $100s. So, you could viably you would have taken that ring if you were looking to rob somebody, plain and simple. On March 3rd of 1970, we had 16-year-old Cosette Ellison from Moraga found in a ravine along Morgan Territory Road, Mount Diablo foothills, east of Clayton. A lot of people want to kind of clump all of these. There's about 4 bodies that are found at the foothills of Diablo. They want to clump these with the Zodiac. However, I want to remind everybody that this is all pre-mentioning Mount Diablo and radians and anything else. And he wants you to look along the radians. If he wanted you to look at the foothills of the mountain, he would have said, search the mountain, right? You'll find 4 more victims. He laid most of his victims out for people to see. He did not attempt to hide their bodies. So some of these murders, I have been slowly but surely kind of working my way into the fact that they likely were not committed by the Zodiac. Either way, Cosette Ellison was 5'2", 100 pounds with brown shoulder-length hair. Pieces of her clothing were found along the roadsides in the area, which this is a direct match back to Elaine Davis, where they found her shoes, her coat, certain items along the path as he's obviously leaving the area with that person. Philip Hughes did not take credit for Elaine Davis, but this particular murder is very similar to Elaine Davis. Philip Hughes doesn't actually take credit for any murder until approximately 1972 or after. Don't quote me on that number. We'll get to that when we get there. And he's actually turned in by his girlfriend. So to me, if he is killing before the girlfriend and she's unaware of those particular murders, why would he confess and, stand up and say, hey, pick me? But the bodies are being dumped in the same area. The similarities of the abductions, the time that they have gone missing or maybe even held, the clothing that's left on the roadside, and then eventually the dump site, which happens to be Mount Diablo and seems to be a place where Philip Hughes also dumps bodies. So, I don't have any evidence that has panned out that this actually is included in Hughes, but Detective Holes, a retired Contra Costa detective from that area, states that he believes there's a possibility that Hughes could be included in it. Clayton is actually listed on the death of the murder map. I do have one individual that's left on that map. Now, again, I'm still kind of struggling with where the disappearance occurs versus where the body's dumped as to whether or not that is supposed to be the X marks the spot kind of thing. So if they were abducted from Clayton and then dumped in Santa Cruz, does that mean that he's marking X for Clayton because that's where he abducted him? Or would he be marking Santa Cruz, which we have 4 on the map for Santa Cruz, because he actually dumped them in Santa Cruz? Either way, Captain Harry Durham said that there were distinct similarities in the murders of Maureen Field, 19, which Hughes had taken credit for, and the Cosette Ellison, 15, both of Moraga. So we have them both being stolen out of the same place approximately 2 to 3 years previous to the murders we know that Hughes took credit for. Miss Ellison disappeared after getting off a school bus in front of her Canyon Road home. Her body was found 13 months later in Mount Diablo foothills south of Clayton. I believe what they had said on this, and let me see if I have that. The bus driver escorted her across the road, watched her collect the mail, and unlock the gate, according to the Juvenile Bureau. So, obviously, again, she made it as safely as she could into the gate based on what the bus driver is saying. So either somebody was waiting on the other side of that gate or they were able to lure her away after the bus had departed. Either way, I would have assumed. Go ahead.
She looks a lot older, these newspaper pictures. In the other pictures, she doesn't look anywhere near 15 or 16. She looks to be 12, 13.
I know. And I think they said this was a freshman or sophomore year picture. And she was younger here. I guess, these are your formative years and you do tend to kind of, fill out and become that woman during high school. So you're right. I mean, I look at this first picture, the one searches pushed for missing girl, and that one is extremely similar to this younger version. And then, of course, we see this older version that is being placed in here. And she's a Campo Lindo student. I was like, Campo del Campo. No, that's 6 degrees difference, right? Yep. That brings us to Eva Blau. Now, I do believe that this could be a possibility for the Zodiac. So March 3rd, 1970, 17-year-old Eva Blau from Petaluma Hill Road in Santa Rosa, California. This is part of the Santa Rosa serial killer. This is where these particular murders begin. She's found March 13th of 1970 in a driveway of a fruit drying yard in Petaluma Hill Road, just south of Santa Rosa city limits. She's a freshman at Sonoma State in nearby Rohnert Park. I could not even find a picture on her. I was a little disappointed about that. The body was found covered by her blue coat, her sweater pulled up, skirt and panties pulled down. Body had bruising marks and punctures, but was declared poisoned. Mescaline is found in a southwestern cactus, and some of these murders that we're coming up to, we're going to start talking about this mescaline or this peyote buttons, as I think Harriet was talking about last week in her solves. So again, her solves keep wrapping up around what we know to be occurring during this time, which keeps me interested in what she has to say. I did go back and question her in regards to her statement about the peyote button gel by Anstey. She believes Anstey, which is one of our upcoming victims, was actually involved in creating this gel that could then be used in other ways and other forms rather than just consuming in order to get that high. Harriet actually said that she lived in San Francisco long enough to know that they do weird things with drugs.
Oh, yeah.
And I can imagine. I mean, I think, wasn't there like something for quite some time? So kids were taking shots of alcohol anally and dying from it.
Some people died. Yeah. Crazy.
So yes, evidently people will cram some stuff in some weird freaking places in order to get high. They'll drop it into their eyes, they'll put it up their nose, they'll ingest it sublingually, evidently anally. Like there's all kinds of places you can take drugs, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh at these people, but that made me hot a little bit. Zodiac talks about purchasing his weapons before the ban at some point. And we have to note that that mescaline and these types of things were banned. We're going to come up to that. I believe I'm just a little ahead of myself in that statement, but it does state that you would need a massive dose for it to be deadly. So it wasn't like, oh, we just tried the gel and died from it. You would then had to have probably ingested a large amount, or the possibility that because of the absorption factor of it happening in another orifice where the skin was very thin and it could reach the bloodstream faster, could be an exposure to it at a higher dose at a quicker rate that could cause a death, not requiring nearly that large of a dose. I'm not a scientist, but it's just my thoughts.
Yeah.
So it looks like they traced Eva's last night. And Sheriff Inspector said the 17-year-old Sonoma State College co-ed apparently went somewhere and had a large meal after she left some friends at the resident hall. I also believe she was getting ready to take a math test. Yeah. So she had a mathematics exam the very next day, which also kind of alludes to the mystery of why would she have taken off, had this large meal with someone else, knowing that she's supposed to be studying for this mathematics exam the next day. Why would she take this type of drug where there really is no known come down time? You know, it's not like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to, you know, be high for an hour or two, or you really don't, you can't predict LSD. Evidently, some people say it lasts for hours. Some people say it could last for days, and you could still be having effects from it for days afterwards. Either way, somebody going to college and somebody preparing for an exam the next day, it just doesn't seem likely that she would have been out there doing something like LSD.
Correct.
I think there's also some information in here where they stated she was familiar with this particular drug and had tried or done it. So she knew the effects. She would also have known how much to take or how much not to take, obviously, in the interim. I just kind of put out here a map here to show the difference between where she was, they believe. So last seen at Jack London Hall in Cotati Avenue, and then found on Petaluma Hill Road, which is literally only a 7-minute drive, basically, from where she was last seen at the school or at Jack London Hall. And then somewhere between that time frame had stopped and had a large meal. So it sounds to me an abduction, just like Jeanette Healy, which we will see here shortly. Elaine Davis has been abducted. Leona Roberts has been abducted. Although I find that the abductions of those individuals were more home invasion type, or literally Leona Roberts was in her boyfriend's apartment. Elaine Davis was in her own home. So these are different types of abductions versus he caught her on the road or disabled her car or had done something in that manner. She was on her way home and was within a half mile of her home. And before she got there, she went missing. So to me, that kind of sounds like somebody may have tampered with her car and prevented her from making it that half a mile home.
Perhaps. That's a Zodiac MO. And there's lots of unsolved killings up in that area. And that, may or may not be Zodiac.
I think that he lists something like this murder map actually lists 8 victims in the Santa Rosa area. So again, we will look at when these murders stop, how many there are. Does it coincide with the map? Was the map made before the murders were completed? And do we have more murders after the map? Sandy Bett said she got it somewhere in the 80s. I want to say mid to late 80s. And I believe that the serial killing spree was pretty much done by that point. So he could have literally have tabbed that map with those 8 victims, knowing he had killed 8 people. These are just some more articles that I had pulled up in regards to Eva Blau. This is, of course, they're still trying to determine what the cause of death was. Let's see. Yeah, let's go back.
Yeah,
so
the
substance.
But I don't think the substance killed her.
Right. Well, this one says quick death substance killed SSC co-ed Eva Blau. A substance that produces quick death killed Eva Blau, a pathologist told the sheriff's office today. Sheriff's Inspector John Kaufman said the pathologist reported he had isolated an unidentified substance in the 17-year-old girl's stomach, which he strongly suspect caused the girl's death. Now, the fact that she had purportedly eaten this large meal, that large meal could have been laced.
Yes. And I don't think it would have been mescaline or LSD. It would have been something else. Otherwise, they would identify.
Let's see. Well, I think they do eventually identify it. Reportedly have isolated a foreign substance with the cause of the pretty 17-year-old's co-ed's death still undetermined. The investigation by sheriff's office is beginning to bog down. The coroner's office yesterday reported that the state crime lab in Sacramento has found an unidentifiable substance in the girl's bile, a liquid secreted by the liver. With no idea what it might be, the pathologists are conducting tests attempting to compare the substance with a wide spectrum of drugs. The procedure, the coroner's office said, is time-consuming and painstaking. So, let's see, could I shoot it? Yeah. All right. So, that's pretty much, that brings us into Anstey.
The substance, right?
We will as we move in. Okay. So these were articles up to that point, but I do believe that they eventually identify it as mescaline. Next murder here is Anstey, possibly. What's that?
Mescaline wouldn't kill her unless it was highly concentrated, and it would.
That's what they were saying.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have to be a heavy dose in order for that to have killed her. And I have to believe too that if there were strange ways that people were using it, consumption through the stomach would have some type of a breakdown and effect on that drug. As it goes through the system, it needs to make it to the intestines to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So there is a chance that it could lessen the degree of the potency going internally into your stomach versus other ways that it could be ingested or taken as well. I mean, I don't know anybody who's taken the stuff, let alone know anybody who's taken it anally versus orally to know the difference. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't make sense that she would take it voluntarily. And it doesn't make sense that she would, if she did, take so much enough to kill her, which is rare, really rare. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what it comes back to, and maybe it was Anstey that actually has the experience with it, as we'll find out. One of them had an experience with it. They talked about it in the articles and stated that the individual would have known the difference between what was too much and what wasn't in order to kill themselves. But so possibly last seen on March 14th in 1970 in a restaurant with a man. So here we have somebody eating again with a man just before being found dead, which is very consistent with Eva Blau being found with a full stomach of food. She's found on March 21st in 1970. This is Marie Antoinette Anstey. This is the individual that Suchet was talking about in regards to the peyote buttons gel. She was found on Morgan Valley Road near Lake Berryessa, so literally just an extension off. This could be one of the Napa murders that are listed on the Fairfield letter by the Zodiac. This was determined to be absolutely a mescaline murder, LSD or acid, a psychotropic drug. Estimated time of death was 5 to 6 days previous to her being found, so her death is listed at approximately March 16th of 1970. Research, like I said, Zodiac purchased weapons before the ban went into effect, and I found that there was a 1971 ban on mescaline and other psychotropic drugs. So that's where that one came in.
Okay.
I do believe that this one is listed on the murder map. Either way you cut it, you're between Napa and the Sonoma type area is definitely where the Sonoma hitchhiker or the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders were occurring as well. Sonoma Police Department or Sheriff's Department was definitely involved in the investigations. She's found in Lake County near the border of Napa County in a rural area that is a continuation of the Berryessa Knoxville Road. Like I said, Fairfield letter indicates that Napa is going to have 8 victims. This could be his perception of it being Napa and that it's really Santa Rosa, because we do have 8 listed on the map for Santa Rosa. So I thought that was kind of like again, he has word games. He's not necessarily lying to you, but he's telling you it in a way you have to figure it out on your own. She was a resident of Vallejo. The Fairfield letter did indicate that there would be 6 victims to come. Is she one of 6, or is she a Napa victim because it's where the body fell? Question becomes what he considers to be the place of murder. The left earring was missing, and this starts to be something that is seen throughout the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. They found gravel and sand in her lungs, which indicated she had drowned in a stream, which there was a stream in the area, but not where the body was found. So she basically was submerged at some point in time, enough so to have gotten the sand and gravel into her lungs while she was alive, because you can't breathe this stuff in once you're dead. And then in Stephen Dewhurst's book, I actually found this picture of Jack's green metal box and this little sandwich. This is that old Tupperware sandwich container on top there. And inside that happened to be earrings. And I think somewhere along the line, I have some clearer pictures of these earrings because we actually laid them out and I took pictures of them. But this was inside of a baggie found inside of the box. This was found in the Flagstaff, Arizona storage shed that Dennis had obtained from Jack, which most people don't know. It shows that it was found in 2001, but Dennis didn't receive access to this particular shed, I believe, until 2005. That's what he conveyed to me. And that was because after this 4 or 5 years of attempting to turn Jack in, he's being blown up by Tom Voigt. He's being neglected by the SFPD in regards to evidence. FBI is taking him seriously, but if you can't get into these other jurisdictions and they won't investigate, it seems nobody's going to get anything done because nobody is literally working together. So Stephen Dewhurst writes in his book, Turning Jack In. Dennis took the material he got from the shed in Copley Drive back to Sacramento and started going through it. He realized that he had gotten almost all of Jack's personal papers going back to the 1940s and into the 1980s. There was also a grayish green metal file box with very worn paint and a coating of dust. A psychic called in on the Zodiac case in 1971 and had predicted the existence of such a box. Dennis had never seen this box before. Inside, Dennis found what looked like a collection of souvenirs from a serial killer. Over the next 8 years, Dennis continued to excavate materials from that haul, and it would be 2008 before the full relevance of that material began to be understood, and that's when Dennis found the hood in the PA system. Another commentator, Kristen, had written, the psychologist retained by the SFPD had advised the police that this particular individual relied on the attention that media was giving him, and if this attention was to stop, then he would have no fuel for continuing his actions. We do see at one point that he is starting to be printed later on in the newspaper. This upsets him, and he wants to, he tells them in a future communication that he wants them to make sure it's printed on the front page. I thought that it was interesting that Kristen, a poster on this message board, I'm not sure, this might have been Voight's, had the opportunity to view the coroner's reports from the girls' unsolved homicides and claims there is a suspect-victim relationship with Arthur Lee Allen. Again, we also know that there was a relationship between Jack Terrence and Arthur Lee Allen. Arthur Lee Allen evidently gave Jack a ride home from Lake Berryessa at one point in time before actually being put under the limelight as a suspect and being reported on the news, in which Jack, seeing him on the news, said, "Oh, that's the nice man who gave me a ride home." Abducted after driving her car home from visiting her parents. So again, we have this whole entire thing with the vehicle. Her vehicle was found at an animal shelter blocking the driveway. I thought this was something that was similar to Kathleen Johns because it was found that her vehicle was disabled as well.
Right. Later, it was burned, right? Kathleen Johns?
No, not Kathleen Johns. Hers, Anstey's. Her vehicle was found in an animal shelter blocking the driveway, and it was found to be disabled. So again, we're back into that realm of disabling vehicles. And I wrote, could this be similar to Kathleen Johns' abduction in 3/22 of 1970? And I think we can all see that it is. Her body was found face down and nude. Kristen compares this evidence with other girls found in the Sonoma County and San Francisco at several schools. So obviously there are some murders in San Francisco that are occurring that I will need to find and make that connection to these other homicides for these missing left earrings. So evidently he was only taking the left earring.
Okay.
Sheriff believes that she died elsewhere, which is exactly what I thought, and was taken to this spot, and that there was no attempt to hide her body. There, already talked about the freshwater stream. She was found to have been immersed in fresh water hours before or after her death. I like that the newspaper said after her death, because you can't suck in and breathe in gravel and sand if you're dead. So it obviously happened previous to her dying. Why move her to an open public spot unless you're wanting to make sure that she's found like many of the other victims? And that is definitely Zodiac MO. Included the identity was a size 6 ring found near the body, gold with purple oval stone, valued at approximately $50. This clearly wasn't a robbery if they left that behind, or it belonged to another victim and it was left with her body, which follows the methodology of the Zodiac, bragging about leaving clues and fake clues. Eva Blau has now been determined to have died from a large dose of LSD. So there's your answer. This article covers that.
Okay. So that's where they're doing the test to see what it was. Wouldn't have LSD one of the first things they tested?
I know, right? Well, but maybe mescaline. But if mescaline is kind of unknown, LSD was likely known because of the hippie groove going on back then. But if mescaline was something relatively new and derived from a completely different plant, I'm not sure. I don't know how these things work. Not a scientist, don't know about these drugs, but it is possible, I would assume, that maybe the unfamiliarity and the newness of the mescaline hitting the market was a reason why they had to go and do this ban. Yeah.
But my point is, if it were LSD, they would have found out early on. They said how painstaking it was and how difficult it was to do the comparisons. That would have been something you would try and eliminate early on, I would think.
Exactly. Additional evidence says she was last seen at 2 a.m. on March 14th at a night spot at 1506 Sears Point Road and left there to meet up with a friend and left the car at the animal shelter. So she left to meet up with a friend, and then because the car was disabled, had to drop and leave it and left with that friend. So it was disabled and the keys were not in it, but they were not found with her body either.
Wow.
Okay, well, we didn't even make it to the 4th murder at this point, so we're not going to make it to Kathleen Johns. We are about out of time. Is there any comments that you'd like to make?
No, that one woman, can you go back to the blonde woman with the glasses?
Anstey?
Anstey. She looks like my ex-girlfriend, Anna. Yeah.
Maybe I'll find it. Maybe she's the one that actually has experience with this drug and should have known how much to take. So I will look more into that and see if I can find that information. But we are all done for this week, you guys. We will come back, finish up that fourth murder and the abduction of Kathleen Johns next week. Everybody take care. Thank you for joining me, Nolan, and we'll see you guys next Friday. Bye.
Bye.